Hey guys, today we are going to be going over absolute value equations. So if you will go ahead and get some paper out, that way you can write down these notes and have them to reference when you're doing your classwork. The first example I have is the absolute value of 3c equals 21. So remember, absolute value bars look like this. And remember, anytime you have absolute value bars, they automatically make your answer positive. The reason is because absolute value means your distance from zero, and distance can never, ever, ever be negative. So that means what's in here could equal 21 or does equal 21, but it also equals negative 21. These absolute values, remember, take the negative and make it positive. So I can rewrite this as 3c, and it could be any variable. I chose c, but it could be x or y or t or whatever, equals 21. We know that this one is true, but also 3c equals negative 21 is true. Because of the absolute value, the positive one is true and the negative one is true because the absolute value would have changed any positives to negative. So every time you have an absolute value equation, take what it's equal to, make one equation the exact same, you can ditch the absolute value bars, and make the other equation the negative version, showing that they're both the same. What this also means is for every single absolute value equation, you're going to have two answers. So let's go ahead and solve this one. If I divide both sides by 3, I get that c equals 7. And over here, if I divide both sides by 3, I get c equals negative 7. Now, it just so happened I had one positive and one negative. This is not always going to happen. It did happen this time, but it will not always happen. So just showing you that. But these are your final answers right here. For example 2, we're going to do the absolute value of x plus 30 equals 16. Now remember, every single absolute value equation is going to be equal to a positive number because when you take the absolute value of something, it's always positive. So I need to break that up so that I get the positive one and the negative. So I'm just making the 16 negative. This stays the same. And then I'm solving for it. So minus 30. And this one would be minus 30. So notice this time, remember you're always going to have two answers, but this time my answers are not the same. They are very different. So don't assume that just because you got one answer, the other one's going to be the negative version. That is not always the case. In this problem, it was negative 14 and negative 46. All right, we'll do another one. I just want to do a few examples, that way you feel comfortable with these. But they're very easy once you get the hang of it. You're just taking the equation you have, turning it into two equations, a positive one and a negative one, and then solving. So we'll have the absolute value of 7 minus 2m equals 3. So just like the others, I'm going to write one equation exactly like this without the absolute value. And then I'm going to write it again where the 3 is negative. All right, for this one, my goal is to get m by itself, so I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. And then divide by negative 2. So m would be positive 2 for one of the answers. And for this one, subtract 7 from both sides. And then divide by negative 2. So there are my two answers, 2 and 5. Like I said, guys, these are not hard, but I do want to give you a few examples. I do want to give you one more just so you can see what it looks like when you don't get whole numbers. If you feel comfortable with this by now, you're good. But if you would like to see one more where you don't get whole numbers, I will do one of those real quick. So last example. So just like before, I'm going to make two equations. A positive one and a negative one. And when we go to solve these, I want to move the 5. So I get 3a equals 18. And then when you divide by 3, you get a is 6. On the other side, add 5 to both sides. You get 3a equals negative 8. And then when I divide by 3, notice this does not divide pretty, and that is okay. You are going to get fractions as answers in this class. There is nothing wrong with that. So a equals negative 8/3. It is okay to have fractions, so do not freak out when you run into one that's a fraction and be like, oh man, I did it wrong. That does not mean you did it wrong. Sometimes the answers are fractions. All right, guys, that is the end of absolute value equations.